Oh, bigger. Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
Just like that, we're back. We're getting set for UFC 287 on an early Saturday morning. As always, one half of your host, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, as always, respective socials. It's Matt Allen FNP. The chat for an early morning on a Saturday already lit up. Pulse Reloaded, Hype MMA, Craig, Noah. We've got Craig again, Stats.
I've seen a lot of excitement for this card all week, which is really nice to see because I was kind of concerned to see just how excited people would be to see this matchup for the fourth time. I know it's only the second time in MMA, and their first fight was a really compelling matchup, but still, I was a little bit concerned just to see kind of what the average fan appeal was to see this fight for the fourth time. But again, it has been a lot of hype. I know I'm really excited for this one because there's so many storylines coming out of today. Like, what happens if Adesanya loses? What happens if he wins? Like, and there's a lot of other great fights on the card, of course, but this is just one of those really fun pay-per-views that not only has a lot of star appeal, but has a lot of good prospects on it too.
And when you look forward to next weekend, we already showed it. You have Holloway taking on Arnold Allen in the main event. It's a card that's going to happen from Kansas City with one Kansas City fighter, and that's Zach Cummings, and it could be his retirement.
One of the great main events, though, for a fight night card. Like, that is a really high-quality 5-round fight.
It definitely is. Tristan over there in the comments section, not hyped for the main event of UFC 289. They're doing you dirty in Vancouver, but that's the first card in Canada in a very long time. First card in Vancouver since Gaethje versus Cerrone, so at least you've got something to look forward to over there. Ayman Zahabi taking on Arichi Long as far as announced bouts on that one, but when we do focus in on 287, again, it's the fourth installment, Pereira versus Adesanya. Get you up to speed really quickly before we go to the fight of the night. First kickboxing fight, unanimous decision win for Pereira. Most people thought that Adesanya won. Second fight, Adesanya rocks Pereira. Pereira's got to try and do the clinch to hold on, to try and regain his momentum, get those cobwebs out of there, and then in the next round, knocks him out with that left hook, parades around the ring, and really does a good job of it. The last time out, Adesanya rocks Pereira early. He takes him down. Pereira wins the second round, double leg takedown.
Wild.
As it goes on, 3-1 for Adesanya. In the fifth round, Pereira cuts the cage with the hook to the body, goes hooks upstairs, finishes that fight. So a lot to look forward to when it comes to this installment. But when we talk fight of the night, Matt, we're not talking about the main event. You've got Rob Font taking on Adrian Yanez, and I saw it out there yesterday. I mean, Adrian Yanez, if you watch the weigh-in show, that really long one that they do throughout the weigh-ins, Chris Weidman, DC, having fun with hair. And when you looked at Adrian Yanez when he did the interview, He needed a lot of water. He was kind of spacey, wasn't answering the questions all that great, but as it went on, having a lot of fun. You go to the ceremonial weigh-ins, he was looking in the crowd. He must have had some friends out there because he was trying to find them, waving, having a good time. Yanez with that big opportunity on a main card, going from fighting, what was it, like the 100 and some ranked bantamweight on Tapology and Tony Kelly to now a top 10 ranked guy in Rob Font. You're jumping up super high, but Yanez, 10-fight win streak, hasn't lost since 2018. A split decision to Miles Johns for the LFA belt. Miles Johns is still pretty a good fighter in the UFC. So this fight, Matt, it is a lot of fun between two primary boxers.
This is an incredible fight because we know just how good Rob Font is. He might not be just in the elite of the elite, but we know he tests those guys and he pushes them very hard.
And I see it there, Prince Vegeta-san saying 138. Geesh. No, Rob Font, so this is the graphic from the start of the week, but you'll see it in the QMK, the 180 degree or 180 pixel pictures that you see on the regular screen. Rob Font made weight coming in at 135 on the nose.
But for Rob Font, yeah, both these guys are primary boxers. I'm just concerned about how much damage Rob Font has taken throughout his career. And if this is one of those fight of the nights, and I do think this will result in a fight of the night, how long can Rob Font just withstand that? Because I agree with you. This is a big step up in competition for Yanez, but he is more than justified it at this point. Like, if he keeps on fighting guys outside of the rankings, he's probably going to keep on finishing them in spectacular fashion. So I think this is kind of the perfect step up because Rob Font's just one of those perfect opponents for that. He's durable. He has a great gas tank. He's not going to give up on himself, and he's going to go out there and throw with great output. So it's an incredible fight.
Should be a good one. And then on that main card as well, Kevin Holland, Santiago Ponzinibbio. What's the hand look like, Kevin? That's what we're going to find out.
Exactly.
Laser right hand, but he broke 3 bones in his hand in his last fight. And once they were broken, that was it. The game plan was out the window. He got teed off on by Wonderboy. Wonderboy was able to take him down too. So a lot of things to look forward to when it does come to this one. Bilbo Swaggins, is it Yanez or is it Yanez? I showed the graphic in the video. He says it's Yanez now, so it's Yanez. But when it does come down to this matchup, Matt, Holland versus Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio, huge comeback third-round knockout his last time out against Alex Morono. And Kevin Holland, it's the buy low on Holland, it's the buy high on Ponzinibbio. You meet in the middle, you get a fight of the night.
And what version of Ponzinibbio are we going to get? Because in some fights, it takes him a little bit of time to really find his range and find his rhythm. But once he is able to get that rhythm and start rolling downhill, he is really difficult to get stopped. But like you said, Kevin Holland has a lot of those counters. He's got that great right hand. So if he is 100%, and I know that is a really big if, this should be an incredible fight because Ponzinibbio is not going to go down from the first shot. And that's the big thing about this fight. I think it'll look a lot like the Joaquin Buckley fight. I know that's a weird one to bring up, but Ponzinibbio is a guy who will push the pressure. He is going to force the action. He's going to throw a lot of his own boxing combinations. So it's a dangerous fight for Holland because he's going to be on the back foot. He's going to have to throw those counters. But if he can land those counter shots, they have devastating effect.
James F saying, "Sup, Canadian boys, have a massive pay-per-view to tell you all about." There were a lot of people that reached out. As far as going to UFC 289, it's all the way across the country, so it's probably not going to happen. But it's definitely going to be a big-time card.
It will be. I've never been to Vancouver. Seems like a lovely city, though.
Neither have I. Naola saying Carl Williams. And Vince Vegas saying, got the weight wrong. Well, Vince, I'm going to tell you this, Vince Vegas. The weights are all going to be correct on the main screen. As far as that fight of the night screen is concerned, we just reused the graphics from the start of the week. But when it does come down to this one, Matt, it is a big slate of fights. We haven't lost any. There was only one fighter that did miss weight, Marcus Serrato. Oh, those Blue Jays slayed it, and they were able to get the win in that home opener for the Angels. But if you're a Halos fan, you get to see Mike Trout mash. So 441-foot home run in that one. But when it does come down to this one, Matt, out of all of these bouts, we do have a number of ranked fighters in the competition. Yeah. And that co-main event between Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal definitely has some heat. But the fight card does start off with a bout in the women's strawweight division. Former LFA champ Jaqueline Amorim taking on the former LFA strawweight challenger. She wasn't able to get it done in that title bout. We're talking about Sam Hughes. Matt, we were split on the pick at the start of the week on this one. The voters at Fight Night Picks in the poll are not split on this one whatsoever. But there was a comment earlier on in the week that said, Craig, you're really hating on Jaqueline Amorim and you're making the pick. Is it hating to say she's won all of her fights in the first round and then talking about her jiu-jitsu accolades? I don't consider that
No,
hate.
But I feel like you were selling pretty high on Sam Hughes, that's all.
Yeah, and I didn't pick her. So, again, we're split on this
I thought you
one.
did have Hughes.
No, I have Jaqueline
Oh,
Amorim,
okay,
you have Sam Hughes.
I thought we both had Hughes, that was all. This is the weird thing about this fight. For Amorim, I can see a world where she goes out there and gets an early finish off of her back using that great grappling. And I do think the grappling is going to be a big factor in this fight because as steady as Hughes can be, I do think she is going to need the offense of her takedown to really open up her game and to try to win rounds. But this is one of those fights where I'm probably going to look stupid no matter what. Either Sam Hughes is going to go out there, use her work rate, use that clinch control, use that top pressure. And again, those are things I never like relying on a fighter trying to use to win a fight because normally they have to do that because they can't really go out there and get a finish. They don't have that one-punch knockout power. They don't have kind of top-tier submission skills. And I wouldn't say Sam Hughes has either one of those things, but she is well-rounded. She pushes a really good pace. And she is an interesting fight for you to take in your UFC debut. I'm not saying she's the most difficult fight for you to take. She's not the easiest fight for you to take, but she offers very clear skill checks that you will have to pass. And I think the cardio will be an issue. So I think for Hughes, that will be a big X factor for her. But this is a fight that could easily go either way.
Yeah, that track and field background from Sam Hughes out of Wofford, that's definitely one of those great ones. When you look at it for Jaqueline Amorim, though, in terms of being to that nth degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, she is, of course, a black belt in the discipline, but when you look at it, I mean, 2017, she finished third in the IBJJF Worlds, second in No-Gi Worlds in 2016.
And she's active, too.
Transition over into MMA very, very well, but the level of competition that she faced, not really the greatest. So over with the LFA, she was able to win that belt, but the first time that she fought for the belt against Lovett Young, the commission over in California said, they weren't going to sanction the bout after it was already made. So on the day of the fight, they scratched that. They end up fighting across the way on the East Coast. She gets the win. She retains the belt and so on and so forth. But again, I say at Fight Night Picks, this one isn't overly close with the fans, and it isn't. I mean, you've got what? 78% going with Amorim to get the win over Sam Hughes. But the trouble is, I mean, Jaqueline's finished all these fights in the first round, and Sam Hughes to trick you out, especially in the first round. You look at Sam Hughes' debut against Tecia Torres on short notice. It was the end of the first round, Fists of Fury for Tecia Torres. The one thing that I found strange, though, was that the pre-fight show, they were saying, oh, she's a finisher, she's a finisher. Sam Hughes, I mean, one finish in the UFC. She was able to beat Elise Reed, get the takedowns, work the ground and pound. She was beating lesser competition on the regional scene on her way up, although she had fought some decent names. But if you do look at it, Sam Hughes has a better cardio. Sam Hughes has all right takedown defense. Sam Hughes has decent takedowns of her own, and her boxing's continued to progress. But out of Fortis MMA, she definitely has that quality of training partner. I will go with Jaqueline Amorim as I did at the start of the week for the fact that I think she has more methods to finish in this one. But if we get past the first round into the second round, third round, that's completely uncharted territory. And that's when you get worried if you're like, oh man, Jaqueline Amorim, she's the one for this week. So I do have Amorim. You're going to go with Sam Hughes. But this is one of those fights where I was 50-50 on the line. And Amorim's a pretty decent favorite in the matchup. Matt, Shayilan Nuerdanbieke taking on Steve Garcia. I was in a music video for the Mummy Cats called Wolverine. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke's nickname's the Wolverine. Is there a correlation there? I don't know. Steve Garcia on his left pec had that weird hole, so you wonder if he's got the staff, but allegedly, I don't know. It didn't look good.
For me, it's just, can Steve Garcia do enough in this fight? And I do think it's going to come down to the activity of Garcia, and I know that's a pretty good bet to make, because Steve Garcia is normally doing something, but that activity can come to bite him more often than not in a lot of these fights against higher levels of opposition. I'm not saying Nuerdanbieke is the hardest fight in the world, but still, he hits hard, he's very well-rounded, he's shown a good gas tank too, and the gas tank and the wrestling, I know the wrestling was something we both touched on a lot at the start of the week, is going to be a really important factor in this fight, because if Garcia is starting to make him feel uncomfortable on the feet, Nuerdanbieke does have the transition ability to take this fight to the mat and start implementing his own wrestling. Now, I don't think Shayilan won't have any success on the feet, and that's why we'll have to use his wrestling. I just like that that's in his back pocket that he can go to if Garcia is starting to really go downhill with some of those flurries. But the thing about Garcia that is going to make him wildly entertaining, but is also going to make him one of these can kind of win any fight, kind of lose any fight guys, is he is so aggressive. And I love watching Garcia fight for those reasons, but it does leave a lot of holes opening. There's a reason we don't see guys like even Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira at the top of the division. Yes, they're wildly exciting. Yes, they get clipped from time to time, but they still have pretty good defense. Just the fact that they're fighting other guys at the top level. With Garcia, there are a lot of those openings for counter shots to get through, and I think if Nuerdanbieke can sit down and throw some some of those looping hooks, he can land some of his own power shots.
Yeah, I mean, Garcia tends to duck into a lot of his shots and then kind of wait, but at the same time, he throws a lot straighter punches than Shayilan does, and with Shayilan, there's much more of a reset than there is from Steve Garcia. So for Steve Garcia in this matchup, he has a giant opportunity in this fight, especially as a decent underdog in the fight. Open plus 250, plus 153. If you look at it for Nuerdanbieke, open minus 300, minus 186. So a lot of people going the way of Steve Garcia in the matchup. At Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one, 76% going with Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, but when you look at the matchup, I know Shayilan was the recipient of a lot of fights that were kind of swept under the rug over in China that resurfaced on his record. He is, of course, 39-10 coming into this one, so if you do the quick math, this will be his 50th pro fight. That's kind of wild. I do like the fact that Shayilan, if it isn't working out on the feet, I think he can dictate where it goes on the mat. And for Steve Garcia, we've seen decent jiu-jitsu, and we've also seen him beat good wrestlers in the past. We talked about that at the start of the week. Sean Bunch and Ronnie Lawrence are two guys on his record, and he does have wins over those two guys. So that really is telling, both over with Bellator as well. For Steve Garcia, the level of competition is definitely on Garcia's side. Garcia training at a Jackson Wink when you look at it for Nuerdanbieke. Killcliff FC with his family member, because again, I don't know if it's his brother or his cousin, but Meerschaert, the mononym, and Steve Garcia was finished by Meerschaert. So again, for me, I do like Shayilan Nuerdanbieke in the matchup, but again, you watch a ton of tape, it blurs the lines, and then you wonder, hey, I'm on the fence. Does Steve Garcia get the win as a pretty big underdog? Maybe like him in this matchup. Matt, the next fight that we look at, the people, they like Chile's Ignacio Bahamondes. I mean, he trains out of VFS with Bilal Muhammad, with a lot of very accredited fighters. Again, one half of your main event, UFC 289, trains there in Juliana Pena. So when you do look at this matchup, Matt, I mean, for Trey Ogden, for Ignacio Bahamondes, you'll see it there on screen. Why didn't Craig put an asterisk next to 159.5? It's a catchweight fight at 160. Trey Ogden a couple of weeks ago was supposed to take on Manuel Torres. Torres couldn't make the weight, and you did have Trey Ogden at 155.5. I found it interesting on that weigh-in show that I normally don't watch, but I did because there was time yesterday, right? I mean, listen, it was the Lord's Day. But when you did look at it for Trey Ogden, Laura Sanko said it was a tough weight cut getting ready for the last one, 155.5. She liked it for him this time. He looked bodied up at 159.5. Bahamondes, big smile on his face. He was all about it.
Yeah, the 6'3" guy who normally has to cut a bunch of weights, probably pretty fired up. He had to cut 5 less pounds too.
100%. Branch Above's hanging out over there in
What's
the
up,
chat
Branch
saying Bahamondes for the win. And listen, if you're hanging out, it's an early morning, it's a Saturday, we're getting you ready for these fights, toss a like. It takes but 2 seconds, and if you can hit up the super chat as well. But when it comes down to this matchup, Matt, we say it's a clash of styles. Can Trey Ogden pump a jab and throw 1-2?
He can. This might be a difficult fight for him to do.
But that's not the meat and potatoes portion of his game. I mean, he is the guy at Marathon MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a personal trainer. The cardio's there for Ogden. The takedowns are there for Ogden. The jiu-jitsu is there as well. Bahamondes, though, he's shown really good takedown defense in the UFC. I mean, he defended all 12 Roosevelt Roberts takedowns.
And that's the thing. Bahamondes hasn't fought the highest level of wrestlers in the UFC, but he's done what he's had to do. And that's what really is important. Like, it's not his fault Roosevelt Roberts is the one taking him down. That's who he was fighting. So, for Bahamondes, what I do like is, when he gets up against the cage, he does a good job defending takedowns. He gets his base very wide, spreads his legs far, and it makes it very difficult to lock your hands behind him, because he is so big for the division. And I know this isn't really a division, but even a catchweight, just his frame with any guys who fight in the lightweight division, it is going to be difficult to take him down if you're not really chain wrestling him. And when he does start fighting guys in the top 15 or close to the top 15, that will of course be a bigger part of their games. But I will be curious to see if Trey Ogden can use that as a part of his game to get the fight to the ground. I agree with you. I think Ogden will have success if he is able to get the fight to the mat, but I think the wrestling might be a bit of an issue. Not that Ogden can't get him down. I just think that's going to be a lot of time for Bahamondes to dig under hooks, start landing damaging shots. And the weird thing about Bahamondes too is, you brought it up at the earlier part of the week, he's a long range guy, but he gets a lot of his work done up close with his own boxing combinations. He likes to kick when he's far and punch when he's up close. If they do find themselves in that boxing range, I know Ogden can put together a lot more volume, but Bahamondes has a lot more pop behind his shots, and I just think Ogden's going to find himself eating a lot of damage in this fight.
Now, listen, fake news, and I apologize, but Marcus Serrato, Ogden owns Krause's gym now. Fun fact, Ogden owned It was Glory MMA and Fitness Overland Park, which was another Glory MMA and Fitness, and they changed the name to Marathon MMA. So it's not totally true right there. But when you do look at it for Ogden, that's where I see him pulling away. If it does get into boxing range, then he can kind of flip out those level changes and try and take the fight down to the mat where he has that decided advantage. But when you're taking down a guy that is 6'3" at a catch weight of 160 pounds or 155, those guys are slippery. And if you look at Ignacio Bahamondes, put him in that same category as a Holly Holm. Everybody knows you're a kickboxing champ as a kid. You're a kickboxer all the way up. What are they going to try and do? Take you down. So you're always going to be working that takedown defense. In MMA, if you do look at the odds, I know Bahamondes was a big favorite at the start of the week. He is an even bigger favorite. He's almost a 4-1 favorite. So apparently I'm picking a giant underdog, probably one of the bigger underdogs on the card in Trey Ogden. 84% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Ignacio Bahamondes in the matchup. Branch above, Bahamondes has been showing growth with every fight, and he seems to be getting better. I think you're right there. He's kind of shook off some of those early losses as well in his career. So if you like Bahamondes, you let us know. If you like Ogden, you let us know as well. But we're split on the pick in that fight. And then it takes us to this one, Matt. Cynthia Calvillo doesn't look like that anymore. She doesn't even in the UFC.com pictures. She looks different. Now, she made weight for the first time since February of 2019 in the women's strawweight division. So as you see right there, 116, I thought she looked pretty good on the scale. Wasn't shaky, wasn't completely drawn out. So a good look there for Calvillo, taking on Lupita Godinez. And when it comes down to both of these women, I think it's the same issue. I know Calvillo's lost 4 in a row. It's been against pretty good competition. Even that last fight against Nina Nunes, added more to her tool belt, had better movement on the outside, which is something that you're probably going to lose to Nina Nunes if you try and use movement on the outside against such a polished Muay Thai artist in Nina Nunes. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, it comes down to consistency for both of these women. And for Godinez, when she fought Angela Hill, the nagging hip injury, she couldn't get those takedowns off. And a lot of people kind of stressed that after the fact when they rewatched that fight. For Godinez, it is the fight that she had against Loma Lookboonmee. It is some of the other wins that she's had on the regional scene and in the UFC. Obviously, when she won that fight at 115 and then jumped up on a week's notice and fought Luana Carolina, great first round, mixed in the takedowns, and then in the second, the third round, the cardio wasn't there. But I'll hit up Bilbo Swaggins with that super chat. Excited for the card. Feel like Pereira Adesanya is a 50-50 fight that's landed Poetan's side 3 times in a row. Can't wait to see what happens. Also, how do you think the Raptors fare in the upcoming play-in tournament?
Thank you, Bilbo Swaggins. It's very nice of you for the super chat. I don't think they're going to do well. Like, they're going to play the Chicago Bulls in game 1. They're probably going to beat them because I'm not worried about the Bulls whatsoever. But they've lost twice to the Celtics this week without Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So,
Derek White Celtics.
I basically, like, I love this team more than any other professional sports team. I don't think, like, if they make the playoffs, they're getting swept by Milwaukee round 1. And do you think I really want to see that? No, I don't want to see Giannis put up 50, 20, and 10 on the Raptors every game. So, I'm going to watch the games, but I'm not happy about them.
So, Matt, when it does come down to this matchup, Calvillo taking on Godinez.
Calvillo, how much does she have left in the tank? Because we've seen her get to the top of the mountain and kind of fade. It's not often we see fighters get back up to the top of the mountain. And for Calvillo, she started her run a little bit later in life. It is kind of wild to think. When she was that prospect making her run, she was 29, 30 years old. And you just kind of have to keep on winning at that point. Because
winning 5 fights, or fighting 5 times in a year in 2017.
Exactly, that was the nice thing. She did remind me a lot of kind of earlier on Angela Hill. Remember how active Hill was earlier on in her career? And even up until recently, Angela Hill was a very active fighter. Just for Calvillo, is it just the fact that her level of competition has gotten a lot harder and that's why she's experiencing these losses? Or has she not been able to make sort of these wholesale changes to her game? Because I agree with you, the striking did look better her last time out, but that was against a Nina Nunes who's a little bit older in her career, who's not necessarily in her prime either. So for Calvillo, I still think the grappling side is there. Neither one of these fighters is really going to wow you with a lot of their striking from the outside, so I do think it's going to come down to the grappling more than anything. And for that reason, I have Godinez, but I will say this, even for Godinez, she's going to have to beat somebody else after Calvillo on a 4-fight losing streak to really try to get into that top 15 and start fighting the more recognizable names in the division, I think.
And this is one where Calvillo, her last win was 2020 against Jessica Ai in a main event at flyweight, and she's still ranked in that division, or she was at the start of the week. So over there in the comments section, we do have Garrett saying the Derek White Celtics are the best Celtics, and they have been pretty darn good. Noah's saying, did you see Volk versus Yair fight was announced? Yes, so good to see the unification right there.
Here's the thing. The Robert Williams Celtics are unbeatable. He just never plays.
Well, they are very good. And when it does come down to this, I mean, we do also have the wise saying the regular season is not the postseason. So we'll see how that one plays out. And Matt, when it does come down to this matchup again, for Calvillo, both of these women, Calvillo may be the better striker at range. Godinez got to kind of close that range. When it does come down to the takedowns, both very, very credited when it comes to their takedown abilities and their jiu-jitsu. At Fight Night Picks for the total votes in this one, almost 80%, 79% have Lupe Godinez to get the win. I have Godinez, but if Calvillo kind of pulled out a veteran-savvy win, if it goes to decision and it goes to a split decision between these women and it's a close fight, Calvillo's going to win the fight because I pick Godinez and I don't get split decisions right.
This is the only reason I disagree with sort of that veteran-savvy thing. She's 9-5-1. Like, the veteran savviness, she's been on the losing end of a lot of those fights. I know the Jessica Eye fight was a good performance, but, like, Jessica Eye didn't do an awful lot in that fight either. I just think for Calvillo, she's at the age of a veteran, but the experience level of a prospect, and it's a hard place to find herself. This isn't me trying to rag on her. She just doesn't have a lot of professional fights, and she's not at the age to where it's easy to start acquiring all these professional fights, because if she wants to fight, she's a big name, so the UFC's not going to give her any easy opponents. I think Godinez has this one, but I agree with you. Calvillo's a good enough grappler to where she could get the win.
It is a tricky fight in the strawweight division. Then we get into a heavyweight banger now. They were saying on that pre-fight show, Karl Williams replacing his teammate and Beast Boy Chris Barnett. Beast Boy is out, so Williams in on about a week's notice, taking on the Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman. And I see some people saying Chase Sherman always fights really, really well when he takes on short notice opponents. Well, he took on Alexander Romanov on short notice, and he didn't win that fight. He's what, 4-10 in the UFC?
It's not great. Karl Williams looks like he can do a standing back.
Troy Hall, are the boys going UFC 289 in Vancouver in June? You think a plane ticket from Fredericton, New Brunswick to Vancouver,
it's
BC
basically
is cheap?
Across the world, not even just the country. Like it's so far away.
For me to fly, if I flew to Alberta, it's what, 2.5, 3 hours to get to Toronto based on the wind. And then it's another 4.5 hours, 5 hours to get all the way to Calgary. And then I had what? Probably another hour and a half, 2 hours to get to Vancouver.
Don't even... it's a week of driving. Anyways, I think Karl Williams is going to beat Chase Sherman. Like, Chase Sherman makes fights interesting when he fights primary strikers. And that is a truth. I think everybody would agree with me in saying that. Like, Chase Sherman is rarely in a boring fight when he's fighting a guy who's going to go out there and strike with him. Find any fight where he's fighting a primary striker. They're normally pretty exciting. The thing is, I just don't think Karl Williams is going to give him the opportunity to be exciting, you know? Like, he will box them for a little bit, but the second things get uncomfortable on the feet, Williams is a very good MMA wrestler, a very talented one. He has very high amplitude takedowns. He has good cardio, good top pressure.
He has cardio.
He has cardio. Maybe not great cardio, but when he gets on top of guys, he's heavy enough to where he doesn't have to waste a lot of energy.
Is this fight better, and I don't know if you saw it, so I'll ask the community at the same time, is this fight better on paper than Yorgan De Castro, Danilo Marquez? It was a clash of styles, and it was one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life.
I think this one is a little bit better on paper.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Just because I think Williams has a decent ceiling in the division if he can put everything together. Again, I'm not saying he's going to be heavyweight champion. I'm not saying he's going to be top 5. You get the idea. He's a good enough wrestler. He has the strength. He has the activity. He has the footwork. If he can continue to build on the cardio, maybe add some submissions to his game, the Karl Williams is a great foundation to build upon.
Karl Williams has talked about the fact he's added muscle mass and bone density to his game.
He looks like he can do a standing back. Like, he is a crazy athlete. 3
fights at light heavyweight as an amateur, 3 at heavyweight, but as a pro, 6 of his 9 overall fights were at light heavyweight. He's gained at heavyweight. He beat Jimmy Lawson on Contender Series. That was a short notice fight for Karl Williams, and Jimmy Lawson was the pinnacle of Penn State wrestling up in the upper weight classes. He then comes into the UFC, beats Łukasz Drewski, and he looked pretty darn good in that fight. A 10-8 round in that one. He dropped him earlier on in the first 2 rounds in that matchup as well. But when it comes to Chase Sherman, the boxing combinations and the leg kicks, that's what you got to watch out for, especially
with every now and then.
Like Sherman, training at Killcliff FC for another camp in this one, coming in a little bit lighter than he did in his last matchup. Karl Williams, an extra half a pound between fights. So for Williams, good opportunity on short notice. Williams is he's a 420 favorite, brother.
Dang.
So when it comes down to it, a big opportunity for Karl Williams. And when you have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one, yeah, a large percentage, another 79% going with Karl Williams. I think the takedowns are big. Chase Sherman, if he can get it, this is going to sound super, this is going to sound Robin Black. if he gets mean at the start, if he grits his teeth, if he goes out there and throws a high propensity of leg kicks to start the fight like I thought he would against Waldo Cortez Acosta's last time out, chop down the legs, working his boxing like he did in his win when he came back the second time against Ike Villanueva. Good opportunity because for Karl Williams, he ducks and dips and doesn't necessarily block every boxing combination and drops his hand as the fights go on. So for me, I do like... Chase Sherman for that opportunity. It's just when it comes to heavyweight, and if you can show good, both these guys have good cardio, but good cardio with the high amplitude takedowns of a guy like Karl Williams, I appreciate Karl Williams for that.
I agree 100%. That's why I have Williams in the matchup.
Groggy Poppers likes the pronunciations, and when it does come down to our next fight, Matt,
this is a hard one to predict, I think at least.
Because somebody messaged on this one on the group page, and they were like, hey, like, Gerald Meerschaert, he's going to turn him away. And I said, straight up, 50-50 fight, and I don't know who to pick. I went with Joe Pyfer at the start of the week. But Masters Gust of Wind, you can send that tree down, and I'm picking Gerald Meerschaert.
I don't know how hockey works, but basketball works this way when you're running a play. It's like action, action, action to get like a scoring play or to get like a scoring thing at the end. So it'll be screen, cut, just whatever you run, and then you try to get the score.
It's like when you're really...
please let me finish this. The thing I like about Gerald Meerschaert is he is the score at the end of a lot of those plays. He might not be the screen. He might not be the running around in open space, but he has the submissions to end it at any point, and he has good enough punching power to end it at any point. And that's what I look at when I look at a guy like Gerald Meerschaert. He's kind of like Eric Gordon for the Houston Rockets, now the Clippers, at the end of his career. Is he old? Does he have holes in his game? Yes, he does. But if you look at what he does well, he does it extremely well. He attacks closeouts, Eric Gordon in real life, but Gerald Meerschaert is insanely lethal on the mat to this day, Deontay Wilder meme. And if you're kind of overconfident on the feet, if you're just winging bombs and not watching yourself, Gerald Meerschaert's going to land those crisp down the middle shots. They might not look like they do anything, but the second one of those wobbles you, he's going to choke you out. And that's the terrifying thing about fighting Gerald Meerschaert when you're some prospect trying to work his way up the division.
So I sat down last night and I thought, listen, I'm going to open up the beer fridge and I'm going to try and pick a fancy beer. So I went with a Stella.
Wow.
And I sat there and I racked my brain on this fight. This was late at night last night before I went to bed. Stella's before bed. I don't know if that's a great idea. Bruno Silva, Dustin Stoisfus, Mahmoud Muradov, and Bartosz Fabinski. So those in the 5-on-in for Gerald Meerschaert, and obviously the loss that he has on his record. It was a quick one. It was over. It was long drawn out. It's Christophe Jacqueline before that. The quick one that I was referencing, Khamzat Chimaev. Is Joe Pyfer better than everybody that Gerald Meerschaert's beat? I'm going to go through more names.
I think he's better than Eric Anders.
Silva, Stoitzfoot, Muradov, Fabinski. That was the only knockout win in the UFC that Gerald Meerschaert has. The body kick win over, Eric Spicely. Duran win, Trevin Giles, Piota, Spicely, James, and Gigliotti. Is Joe Pyfer better than all those guys? I don't think he's better than some of those guys. But it's just such a strange fight when it does come down to it.
You're right about all that, but we've seen Gerald Meerschaert not get takedowns, throw basically no activity from the outside, and just kind of like stand back and be in a defensive shell and throw a lot of jabs. If we get that version of Gerald Meerschaert, this fight's over probably within 2 rounds. Like, I don't think he can use that survivability mindset against a guy like Joe Pyfer, and this is why. Pyfer won't throw 1,000 punches punching himself out like Muradov will. Mahmoud Muradov out-punched himself, and that's why he got tired. Pyfer's going to throw big punches, but he's not going to throw 55,000 of them in the first round, and that's why I do think there's a bit of a difference.
The one thing that scares me a little bit with the Pyfer hype, his first fight out, you're going against a guy that's lost 3 fights in the UFC, hasn't won in years, Alan Amedovski, and he goes out there and fought like Muradov in the first round. Went out there and threw the kitchen sink at Amedovski and got the finish. But when it comes down to this matchup, there's still a lot of hype. You're kind of at the tail end of the prelims. You got to go out there. You got to perform. You're taking on a guy that's 10-7 in the UFC that holds the UFC middleweight record for submissions. And Meerschaert gets another finish. He's tied with Anderson Silva for 11 finishes, the most in middleweight history. Anderson Silva, the GOAT at middleweight, and Gerald Meerschaert, the boat.
If he gets the record, that's going to be a Jeopardy question one day. What middleweight fighter
the
has
wise saying is he a can? I think that's a wild thing to say.
Not.
Cole Richter, top of the morning, boys. Always appreciate the entertainment and insight, gentlemen. P.S. There's ever a bad time. There's ever a bad time for an ice cold Stella. I mean, listen, I just rock the Stella. There's all sorts of stuff. There's some Moose Green. There's some Bud Light. There's some Coors.
Big fan of Bud Light bottles.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, there was somebody up there in the comment section saying boycott Anheuser-Busch. Imagine already buying Bud Light, throwing it out. What a dumb statement to try and make. Matt, when it does come down to this matchup, Meerschaert versus Pyfer. Pyfer on the feet, definitely the guy that you have to watch out for. Gerald Meerschaert lulls you into that sneaky spot, and that's where you were talking about basketball. Gerald Meerschaert fights like when you're playing hockey, and it's one of those teams that's really good, so you got to let's make 10 passes before we score. You can do it in basketball too. Gerald Meerschaert will wait. He'll lull you in. He'll make it tricky. Again, when you do look at this one at Fight Night Picks and you try and establish something here, 65% going with Pyfer, 35% going with Gerald Meerschaert. When I'm making a pick on it, I do ever so slightly have Joe Pyfer with the hands. We'll see how the takedown defense plays up in this one. I like the fact that Pyfer trains with the guy in Sean Brady to get ready for a matchup like this. But when you look at it for Gerald Meerschaert and you try and make a play on it, he trains with the very best at Killcliff FC.
If Joe Pyfer wins this fight, it will be his Rams enemy. Even a higher level, I would say, honestly. I'm going to call myself out on that. Like, if Pyfer beats Gerald Meerschaert, that is a massive step forward for a prospect. I'm not going to lie. Like, if he loses this fight, it's kind of a no-lose situation. You hate to say that in MMA because you take real damage and there's real consequences. But for Joe Pyfer, if you lose to Gerald Meerschaert, there's no shame in that. Like, he's a wily vet who is really good at everything, basically, at this point. And if you beat him, he has all the experience in the world and is going to catapult you forward in the division. So I do have Joe Pyfer because Joe Meerschaert's still so hittable. Even in the fights where he's winning, it's because he's able to eat a lot of damage, get past the adversity, and then he can win. I just don't know if he can eat all that damage to begin with against a guy like Pyfer. He's so heavy-handed. He throws a lot of good combinations. That's why I have Pyfer. But I couldn't agree with you anymore. It's a very difficult fight for him.
All right, Matt. Next one, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, Luana Pinheiro. Said it at the start of the week for Pinheiro. Doesn't really defend body kicks. Doesn't move her head off the center line. Has boxing out of Novo União, but when it does come down to Pinheiro, her biggest attribute, that judo black belt. Her father's a judo master, and as I said, training at Novo União with some of the best. You're only gonna, round out your game when judo is already the foundation. Apart from a guy that we saw not that long ago in Luan Lacerda, who ended up fighting Cody Stamen. What a weird fight that one was. But when you look at it for Michelle Waterson-Gomez, has good judo in her back pocket as well. Get a giant pop from the crowd at the ceremonial weigh-ins. That sidekick is a giant thing. So when it does come down to this matchup, Matt, if Waterson's able to go out there, work on her striking, just treat the mat as lava, she could have a good night out there. And we know that cardio for Waterson-Gomez in a 3-round fight can stay on a line. So when it does come down to this one, Matt, it could be a tricky night out for Luana Pinheiro, who hasn't fought in over a year. So this is a big step up for her, coming from the Randa Marcos fight, and then her last time out, Sam Hughes, winning a decision. First fight that she ever won by decision, or at least gone on that far in a very long time in the UFC. So it should be an interesting one. Prince Vegeta's son, Michelle diminishing returns Waterson. It could be that way. But when you come down to this fight, you were pretty negative about Michelle Waterson.
Because she's 37 years old making a return after a while. Like, for Waterson-Gomez, she became a top contender because she beat Paige Van Zandt. That's just a fact. Like, I'm not making that up. You can go back and look at what the rankings were before she fought Paige Van Zandt and after she fought Paige Van Zandt. If Paige Van Zandt is your fulcrum into the top of the division, what are we doing? Like, we've talked about fight. Arnold Allen has fought a lot of great fighters and beat a lot of great fighters. Now he has to beat Max Holloway, arguably the greatest fighter in his division's history. And if he wins that, he's probably going to get a title shot, but he might have to fight Brian Ortega after that. There might be there's other divisions that you have to win a lot more fights and a lot more difficult fights to get to the top of the division. For Waterson, she was able to get the win she had to get, but when she started to fight those top tier competitions, look what happened when she fought Rose Namajunas. Like, Rose lit her up on the feet, head kicked her, took her down, and choked her out. It was an absolute masterclass by Namajunas, and I know Rose, the multiple time champion, one of the best in the division, but Waterson-Gomez was thought of, and is still thought of, I guess at the time was thought of, as kind of belonging in that part of the division. So if she is able to use her striking, she can win this fight, but her striking consists a lot of kind of that point karate fighting on the outside. Now, that can win her this fight, but I don't know how much of that is going to negate some of the grappling of Luana in this matchup, because it is hard to go out there and win a 50-minute decision in MMA just based on side kicks to the body and a lot of right jabs and movement. You can do it, but if your opponent does start to get any consistent control time or damage, those are going to start to outweigh some of those side kicks to the body. I just don't know if Waterson's going to be able to have the grappling to go back on if the side kicks aren't enough.
Pinheiro doesn't have a heavy top game, and she can struggle from the outside,
True.
finding her range and working her volume. All of these reasons are why Michelle Waterson-Gomez can get a win in this matchup. At Fight Night Picks, 65% going with Pinheiro. I'll go with Pinheiro because I like the judo in the matchup. But again, this is one of those fights. Michelle Waterson-Gomez has a much better opportunity than the fans would suggest. The odds in this one, they're kind of close. They were kind of close to the start of the week, if I remember correctly. Waterson open plus 130, she's plus 140. Pinheiro open minus 150, she's minus 170. So if you do like, Michelle Waterson-Gomez in this fight, it's a decent step down, and I don't mean that as a disrespect to Pinheiro, but Pinheiro at this point in her career isn't Amanda Lemos, she isn't Luana, isn't
exactly
even to the match. Angela Hill's out there somewhere too in the 115-pound division. So
Marina Rodriguez,
when it does come down, she's got a fight coming up not too long. But when it does come down to this one, I'll go Pinheiro, but it's not with the most confidence on the card.
No, exactly. Like you said, you summed it up perfectly. This is the reset for Michelle Waterson-Gomez. If she loses this fight, we'll have to have a difficult conversation. But if she is able to win this fight, it's a great win for her, and she'll probably find herself in a similar matchup, you'd assume, after. It's just kind of being that gatekeeper at 115 pounds.
All right, Matt. So it does come down to our next matchup. This is the featured prelim, the curtain jerker, Chris Curtis, who's taking on Kelvin Gastelum. So I'm going to preface it this way. I'm going to say, okay, the fans all week, they've had Chris Curtis, and we saw that on Tapology when we made the original video. 61% at Fight Night Picks going with Chris Curtis. And for Curtis, I didn't give him enough credit, and I'll say why I was wrong. I said, listen, takedown defense cost him. But that was at 170 pounds, Craig. You cotton-headed Ninny Muggins. It's been pretty darn good in the UFC. Defended 3 takedowns from Phil Hawes. Brendan Allen was able to try and get the back when he jumped to it, but he didn't get the submission. 3 takedown attempts ultimately for Brendan Allen. Adolfo Vieira went for 20. There were many labored ones in that one. Jack Hermanson 0 for 6. And then his last time out, Chris Curtis against Joaquin Buckley. Buckley didn't attempt any takedowns. But Austin Lefebvre hits up the super chat. Austin here from Tallahassee, Florida. I'm here every week. Appreciate you guys. For real.
I appreciate you, Austin. I hope you're having a great Saturday.
And hopefully Florida's amped up for this card in this main event. But when it does come down to this, Chris Curtis, he's been a long-time Extreme Couture guy, so I can't say, well, he's gone there. And he's worked his takedown defense. Obviously, you're training with really good fighters. The Roman Delidzes of the world, the Sean Stricklands of the world, the now Marvin Vittori's of the world. So a lot of good guys to get you ready for a fight like this against Kelvin Gastelum. Marvin Vittori's probably chief among them, a guy that's going to get you ready. And I know Southpaw look versus Orthodox. Kelvin utilizes the good inside boxing, whereas Marvin Vittori closes the distance with his boxing to clinch. But I think that's a pretty darn good guy to get ready for, a matchup like Gastelum.
I just don't look at Gastelum as that big of a wrestler at this stage of his career, to be honest. I know it's a part of his game that he has, but at a certain point when you don't use it in like 85% of your MMA fights, I'm going to believe you don't really have it anymore. Not that he doesn't have it, but I don't think he's thinking to himself, how do I take down Chris Curtis, get his back and choke him out? Or how do I take him down and ground and pound him? I still think the part of Kelvin Gastelum's game that he's going to use to try to win this fight is going to be his boxing from the outside. And I still think he has the hand speed advantage in the matchup. I just don't know if he's going to throw his hands. Like, I have Gastelum in the matchup, but when he just does that thing where he gets into the pocket and then doesn't throw it all and just eats damage, that's not going to win him this fight against Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis is extremely heavy-handed, throws great hooks, throws great counter shots, so Gastelum will be there to be hit, and that's why I do think this should result in a fun fight, but I do favor the hand speed of Gastelum, and that's why I have him in the matchup.
I mean, Austin saying Curtis by decision. You got Itonio saying the fridge. Tioga saying Chris Curtis with another upset. We've got, who else? Branch above, I'm sticking with Gastelum. Is he really only 31 years old? Isn't that hard to believe? And when it does come down to it, I mean, both guys making weight successfully. You'll love to see that one. For Gastelum, all healed up from losing a tooth. So that you hate to see that. Again, Curtis is favored by the fans. Kelvin Gastelum was the pick by both of us in this one. And when it does come down to this one, I mean, Groggy Popper is saying when Kelvin gets hit, it always looks bad. His hair always makes it look worse. That little faux hawk, I mean, it just floats in the wind.
Oh, yeah, waves back and forth.
Do I switch the pick on this one?
Nah, because you know he's going to lose if you do. We do this enough, Craig.
Chris Curtis sometimes gets caught stationary in his fights, and I think that Kelvin Gastelum has a better work rate, so I'll stick with Kelvin Gastelum in the pick. But I am right on the fence when it does come down to it. And, yeah, I mean, the show is the show, so I'll stick with the pick. But I really do want to switch it over to Chris Curtis, but I'll stick with Gastelum. Matt, the main card kicks off. Christian Rodriguez taking on Raul Rosas Jr., and we got to do it. Oh, the picture's not there. Unprofessional baloney. I mean, Christian Rodriguez misses weight. And Rodriguez missed weight on Dana White's Contender Series at 138, and he picked up a win on that one. But he missed weight in this one. Probably doesn't help when you're trying to defend a lot of takedowns from Raul Rosas Jr. And we saw the Rosas, the motor that he was able to show against hairdresser to the stars, Mando Gutierrez, getting it done over on Instagram. But Rosas Jr., I mean, he really is that guy, and he's able to do that against some pretty darn good fighters. I don't have any hot takes in this one. Rodriguez is a pretty good prospect when it comes to his overall game, and I think his overall skill set is better than Raul's, but I will take Rosas Jr. in the matchup.
Rosas Jr. is a really good grappler, and he's huge for the division, too. Like, I know he made weight, and Rodriguez didn't. Rosas is probably going to be the bigger guy come fight night, or I guess come today, just because at his age, at this weight class, he's able to rehydrate, and he does look big by fight night. We learned that his last time out. I do favor him a lot with the grappling. Maybe the grappling is just so overwhelming to where it can take him, maybe not just through 1 or 2 wins, it can help him through 3 or 4, but he's going to have to start using the other parts of his game eventually before everybody starts to really buy into him. But at this point in his career, he's going to get a lot of fights like this, you would assume. I don't think the UFC is going to say, hey, here's a top 15 opponent 4 fights in, you're only 18. So I have Rosas Jr. Should be a fun fight, hopefully, though.
Okay, think about what you just said, though. Think about the other former prospects, similar weight class, who had this kind of hype like Raul Rosas Jr.
I know what Chase,
before.
but this is the problem with Chase Hooper.
And then they went, here's Alex Caceres.
Chase, I agree. You're 100% right. But Hooper wasn't that strong. He wasn't physically strong. Like, he would grab guys in the clinch and they would huck him off like he was nothing. We saw that in a lot of fights. If he got guys to the mat, he was so big, it was like a praying mantis. He would just, like, get above them. There was nothing they could do. Rosas Jr. has that strength to where once he grabs a hold of guys, he can get them to the mat, and I think that's what makes those two guys different.
Yeah, 137.5 and then 137 for Christian Rodriguez. I didn't necessarily love the way that he looked on the scale. Joe Rogan did the old, he missed weight when he stepped on the scale in the ceremonial weigh-ins, and the man got booed, so they set him off. I do have Raul Rosas Jr. in the matchup. And then we get into an interesting one, Matt. And, like, Kevin Holland taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio, lose the first round, lose the second round. Third round, it was, it was well matched, or it started to get even. And then it was a right hand that just kind of froze Alex Morono. The next right hand put him down, and it got the finish. Morono protested the stoppage, but that was just because he got knocked out.
He was hurt, yeah.
He got finished. It wasn't a bad stoppage by any means. But Ponzinibbio, since he came back off the life-threatening injuries, his career and Brian Barberina's are kind of like intertwined by the successes that they had, the fight of the nights that they had. Obviously, Santiago hit higher highs in the division, but both guys had those life-altering conditions in the similar weight class, and when they came back, it's been kind of 50-50. And Ponzinibbio's had those 2 split decisions that were really fun fights, the Pereira fight, and then, of course, the one that he had before that. But I go back to his first fight back. He got starched by Li Jingliang fairly early on. Power. Then he had a fight of the night against Caramel Thunder, Miguel Baeza. And then his last time out, the win over Morono. It's just for Kevin Holland, the thing that scares me. It's that hand that broke, 3 broken bones, all displaced. You saw that interview that he did on kind of a random channel where he had like the tape over his fingers just a few weeks ago. So for Holland, I don't know what that right hand's going to look like, and if it's not a primary weapon, because I haven't seen much for training footage of him over on his Instagram since that last fight when he took on Wonder Boy. I don't know what Holland's going to look like in this fight, and I would stay completely away from it and consider it popcorn. And branch above right there, pop and popcorn for me. That's what I have to say in this one.
I worry about the injuries, but I'm saying this right now. Stylistically, I think Kevin Holland is an absolute nightmare for Santiago.
If he's at 100%.
Yeah, I just said, if you without injuries, which would mean he's 100%, it's not even, like, Santiago Ponzinibbio gets blasted by straight shots. Watch any fight he's ever had. Even when he looked great against Neil Magny, the inside of his eye got a terrible cut that the doctor had to look at multiple times. You know why? Because he got jabbed up by Neil Magny. You know what the difference between Neil Magny and Kevin Holland is? Neil Magny's going to jab you, and then there's nothing powerful coming behind that. If Kevin Holland gets his jab going and lands a straight right behind that, there's devastating effect. Like, he knocks out middleweight, so he can knock out an older Santiago Ponzinibbio. I just think for Ponzinibbio, I understand people like to look at his combinations and whatnot, and his striking is very good, but there is a massive defensive deficiency in his game, and it's the fact that his hands, they're not low, they're not high, they are just kind of open. We talk about that sometimes. And I know he's using that because he likes that looping left hook. He likes to bring his right hand from down low too, but He gets hit a lot. The Jeff Neal fight, straight shots down the middle. Alex Morono landing straight shots down the middle. And not that Jeff Neal doesn't have big pop. Of course he does have big pop. But Kevin Holland strikes in a similar way to a Jeff Neal. He might not be as upright. He might not throw as many kicks. But the boxing is very similar. And I think for those reasons, Kevin Holland can have a lot of success on the feet. The difference is, if Kevin Holland gets him down, like if Kevin Holland gets Ponzinibbio down, I don't know how much Ponzinibbio can do in terms of defensive grappling. I know he has good takedown defense. I know he has a good first move back up to his feet. But if he does get not exposed on his back, but you get the idea, if he does get into some of those longer exchanges on the mat, we all know how good of a grappler Kevin Holland is. He has good submissions. He's a very long guy. He's good at wrist controls. I think we could see a much more grappling heavy Kevin Holland in this matchup.
And he did call for the submission when the fight was announced over on his Instagram. And I see it from Dumb You for the Streets. Holland has power, nearly put Wonder Boy out. He has power at welterweight. But after that hand was done, third round, fourth round, it was all downhill. He threw no output. He got caught by a right hand from Thompson that forced Holland to sprawl in to try and wrestle, and then he got taken down by Wonder Boy. So some odd scenes in that
I think we can agree, though, Wonder Boy at this stage of his career is at a higher level than Ponzinibbio. Like, Wonder Boy still looks like the same fighter for the most part. Ponzinibbio has slowed down a lot more.
It is kind of odd to say that, but yeah, I think it is true. 78% at Fight Night picks going with Holland in the matchup. But I mean, if Ponzinibbio was able to pull together his complete game, if he's able to try and cut the cage and force Holland back up against the cage, because Holland behind the black line, when he's not able to circle away, he can get caught where he's trying to play peekaboo and he can get hit. But for Holland, if you saw it from Morono in that last matchup, and I know Morono replaced the southpaw and Robbie Lawler on 4 days' notice, Morono's orthodox, and Morono does I am the Taekwondo master, and he hops around a little bit. If Kevin Holland can circle away on the outside, pop that jab out there like the Joaquin Buckley fight, Holland can have a lot of success. So for me, I will take Kevin Holland in the matchup. We're in agreement on that one, but it's definitely a tricky fight on this main card that moves us into, Matt, another possible fight of the night. Rob Font taking on Don't Call Me Yanez, Call Me Yanez, Adrian Yanez. And for Metro Boomin, Metro Fight Club's Yanez, we've seen it where guys out of the Houston area, birds of a feather. Daniel Pineda is a big underdog the other week. Oh my goodness, over Tucker Lutz did Pineda look good. Matt's knocking the back thing and freaks out the dogs. But when it does come down to the matchup, Matt, Yanez, like, think about Houston right now. He's the hotness. Who's the hotness over with Bellator that the city decided has a day now? Ralphion Stotts.
That's pretty
Super
cool.
Stotts has a day in Houston now.
Good
so
for him.
Yanez training with guys like that in the Houston area. And when you look at it for Rob Font, think about primary wrestlers where, or some guys that can wrestle where Rob Font switched it up. Rob Font, Marlon Moraes, he was able to switch it up in that matchup. Rob Font, we know it against Vera, we know it against Aldo. It was Aldo and Vera's power that we were able to wipe out the volume numbers of a guy like Rob Font. So if you look at it for Yanez, if he can go in there, split that distance, land those good hooks that he has, go to the body, go to the head, MPTV with the super chat, loves the basketball references and saying that I'm the man. Much love from the 209. MPTV, are you a big Diaz brother fan? Do you like Gilbert
Much love
Melendez?
for the 506.
Yeah, the 506. We're going to have another area code up here at some point. I don't know when. But when you look at this one, Matt, Branch Above going with Yanez as he is an FNP guest / fan. I hope he doesn't forget it when he reaches these high heights.
I just worry about Font's chin. Like, everything you had said in support of Rob Font at the start of the week, I agree with. I can't disagree with any of it. He has the high level of competition. This is a big step up for Yanez. He throws a lot of volume. But the thing is, and I talk about this a lot, if you overthrow volume against a really good counter striker, you're just giving them more opportunities to land their own strike. And that's what I worry about with Rob Font. I agree with you. I think he can out-volume Yanez at a certain point. But we've seen it a few times now to where Rob Font throws a lot of that volume, and not that he doesn't have pop behind it, but I don't think Rob Font is an above average power puncher. I think he has average punching power, if anything, and it might even be a little bit below. He just requires a lot of accumulation.
Average punching power, excellent volume.
Excellent output.
Great boxing combinations, and the wrestling is there in his back pocket.
I don't think we're going to see a lot of wrestling between these guys, to be honest with you. I just think for Rob Font, if he is finding himself using a lot of that sort of X-factor volume, he's going to be eating a lot of shots in return from a guy like Yanez. And I know Adrian's going to have to eat a lot of those shots on the outside for him to have some of that success, but we have seen him grow as a counter striker. Look at the first fight against Randy Costa. He's getting lit up early, and I know Costa just burnt as hot as he possibly could. And so he basically went out there saying, I'm going to win that first round. That's basically all he did. But I think Yanez has grown as a counter striker, and I think that's the biggest part of his game he's going to have to use in this matchup. That's why I like him in the fight.
Font can kind of build off of that Costa success. Costa's a guy that is from that northeast area.
But Costa's going to threaten a lot more with kicks.
But Costa was getting ready for that fight down in Florida. When you look at it for Yanez. Haven't picked against him in any fight that he's had in the UFC so far. I am in this fight because for Rob Font, I look at the successes that he had against a guy like Marlon Moraes. Now, that one was over early and Marlon was on the decline. I look at the successes that he had against Sergio Pettis in their matchup where he was able to mix it up. He was able to mix in his own uppercut. Now, the uppercut, he could get countered by the hooks of a guy like Adrian Yanez.
Yanez hits so much harder than Sergio.
So when I look at it in this one, I do like Rob Font. You like Adrian Yanez. And this is one, Matt, when it comes to the fan vote.
They're close, I'm assuming.
No, not at all. 73% with Adrian Yanez. And Yanez is a pretty big favorite in the matchup. Donkey G hates it that we're saying Yanez, but if the guy says that that's how you pronounce his name,
at this point?
then you pronounce his name like that. So Donkey's getting mad, but you're a donkey in this situation. Matt, when it comes down to it, almost 300 tuning in on an early Saturday morning. It's much earlier than we normally are up, so toss us a like on this one. Make sure we get that traction moving and jumping and weaving on this one. And we'll look into our next matchup, Matt, the co-main event. Durinho taking on Jorge Masvidal. A lot of people in the comment section, if you're not born there, you're not from there. Well, Gilbert Burns has been based there for 10 years, and he did get booed by the fans, but he's taking on Miami's own Jorge Masvidal. So it does come down to a matchup where Masvidal, there's so many people picking him in this matchup. If he's able to keep it standing, you know exactly what he can do. Switching it up between the switch kick and his punches, but his boxing combinations are crisp, they're fast, and they have power. And he picks his power shots where Gilbert Burns has gotten better with his boxing, but I saw Laura branch off on it. Laura branched off on it on the weigh-in show off of the interview that Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell did. And I don't know if you saw that, where they were like, hey, what has it been for you in this camp, and why did you go so hard to the well? And he kind of realized that himself, Burns did. I went too hard to the well. I focused too much on my boxing. From that success that he had against Usman early on, where he rocked him, but into his later fights, even the fight that he had against Khamzat Chimaev, where he kind of exposed him as a mortal man. He's not just this mythical figure.
Like, Gilbert Burns has his athleticism turned up to 55. Like, he's, 35 right now? Like, Gilbert Burns, I wouldn't say is in his prime athletically. He's just such a good athlete that it didn't really matter. Like, he's at 80%, let's say, of the peak of his powers athletically, even though technically he's probably better than he's ever been. It's just 80% of Gilbert Burns is far better than the majority of other athletes out there. I just keep on going back to that Dan Hooker fight that he had against Gilbert Burns, of course, because Dan Hooker at 155 pounds is a very technical striker, has good punching power. And Burns wasn't the best version of himself at 155 pounds, but we saw him catch him with clean shots, counter shots on the back foot, because Burns got a little bit over aggressive on the outside. So I could see Gilbert Burns, I don't know why we're caring about this as much as we are. I could see Gilbert Burns getting clipped by Jorge Masvidal the same way Dan Hooker was able to, but Gilbert Burns is the way more well-rounded athlete out of these two. He has the grappling advantage. We've seen his wrestling against other good wrestlers at this point too, and that's why I do think Gilbert Burns is going to be able to have the success in this matchup. Outside of him getting clipped on the feet, I like Gilbert Burns. So maybe Jorge Masvidal can land that one shot, but we've been doing this for a while. It's like you saying, should I switch my pick on Gaslam, Chris Curtis? Like, when you
switched it on Brendan Allen the last time out against Muniz.
When you start saying, oh, Jorge Masvidal can win this fight if, and then you bring up like the most specific circumstance possible, that means he's probably not going to win the fight. So I have Gilbert Burns.
All right, I do have Gilbert Burns in this matchup as well, because I think he can dictate some of those grappling sequences. And I know Masvidal, he was kind of coy about it all week, but also didn't want to get held up against cage, didn't want to get into those grappling exchanges. You know, that's where Burns is lights out. So for me, I'm going to go with Gilbert Burns in the matchup, but James says Gilbert does have a bad habit of getting dropped by jabs. So we'll see if that happens in this fight, Matt. Main event, Pereira taking on Adesanya, the fourth matchup, the second one in a cage. Adesanya won the first, but he didn't. Pereira won by decision. And the second one, Adesanya rocked him, and then he got knocked out. The third one, Adesanya was winning, and then he got knocked out as well.
But can we talk more about
No, we got to talk about Justin Franks in the super chat. Let's get the you-know-what into it. I hope to have a big sweet bonus for you next week's QMK. Next week, you have Holloway taking on Allen, but what were you going to say about this matchup?
This is my big point to everyone who was like, oh, Adesanya was winning their last fight. He convincingly won one round. Pereira convincingly won one round, and then they had two really close rounds that could have gone either way if either guy landed one more significant strike. You know what I mean? Like, their first fight, it wasn't like, oh, Adesanya was well on his way to winning, and if this goes to a decision, Adesanya's gonna win. Like, if Pereira landed one more hook in round 3 or 4, that would have been enough to make it his round. That's how close those two rounds were. I just disagree with all these people going, hey, Adesanya was winning that first fight convincingly. Like, he rocked Pereira at the end of round 1, which got him that round. I agree agree with that. Pereira did enough with his grappling, oddly enough, to win round 2. And then round 3 and 4 were pretty close. That could have gone either way if either guy landed one more big strike. So I just think this fight is going to be very close until we do start to get some of those bigger actions, like we saw in the first fight with Adesanya rocking Pereira, and of course with Alex coming back and winning by knockout. The big point that I brought up a lot, though, at the start of the week, and I'm going to keep on hammering it home, is how confident is Pereira when he sees Adesanya behind those black lines now? That's what a lot of this is going to come down to, because I know he got hurt early in the fight, but every other time in the matchup when he had Pereira against the cage, when he had Adesanya against the cage, and he actually threw punches, he unloaded on him. There were a lot of situations in that first fight where Adesanya had a lot of time with his back up against the cage, and Pereira wasn't throwing anything. He was throwing feints, he was just letting Adesanya move. And I know it might be a bit of a stretch to say, oh, he was letting him kind of win some of those moments, but I do think there is a point to say that, hey, he was kind of learning the movement of Adesanya to learn when he could throw those shots later on in the fight. So for Pereira, do I think he's going to go on and defend the title 9, 10, 11 times? No. I do think the grappling deficiencies that he have will start to fade away at some point when we see him fight like a Robert Whittaker or some of these other guys who have the grappling in their back pocket. But for Adesanya, he's a 9.9 at a striking. The difference is there's one guy out there who's a 10, and Alex Pereira is unfortunately that guy, and that's why I have him in this matchup.
Jonathan that just keeps copying and pasting his comments. Go look at my Twitter from last week. Out of all of those underdogs that I picked, it's been split decision losses and unanimous decision losses that were all really close. They've gone Matt's way and they haven't gone my way. So I apologize, Jonathan, for trying to be different on some of the picks. Sorry about that, bud. When it does come down to this one, Matt, when you look at it for Pereira, when you look at it for Adesanya, the last 2 fights have ended in knockout by Alex Pereira, and you look at a guy like Adesanya, doesn't seem like he's phased at all. He had the costume change for the press conference that really kind of impressed some people, and they got them on their feet over on Twitter, so everybody was typing about it like Jonathan is over in the comment section. And when you look at it for a guy like Adesanya, I saw it earlier on in the comments, people saying like, Adesanya, is he a can? Is he this? Is he that? It's just like Kamaru Usman when he lost his belt, or before he lost his belt. He's on his way to dethroning George St. Pierre as the GOAT of the division. He's going to go up and conquer middleweight, light heavyweight. Like, there were so many aspirations on Adesanya. Now he's lost the fight, and he had lost to Blachowicz at 100. No, I'm saying Adesanya. Now that he's lost this fight to Pereira, and the fact that you had Adesanya losing to Blachowicz at 205 pounds, it's definitely placed a lot of doubts in people's minds. And when you look at the ages and the weigh-ins and this and that, Adesanya's the younger man. He's got more road miles than MMA. Pereira's the older guy. He's bigger. Is he going to move up to 205? Is Adesanya going to move up to 205, make it a permanent home? It really is hard to say for both of these guys. But when you do look at it in this matchup, I don't often switch a pick when it does come to these title fights, these big main events, in these rematches. But for me, I just like the pressure and what I saw out of Pereira. And is he able to do that in this MMA matchup in the second time in a cage? I think so, especially when you look at the fights that he had over in kickboxing, where he's closing the distance, landing those leg kicks, where there's so much snap to his knee and his calf and his hip. But you look at it in combination, there's not much of a reset. There's not much of a twitch to his upper body. So he's able to throw those
motion.
No, almost halfway naked. And when you look at it for a guy like Pereira to toss in the hook to the body to mix it up top, I do like Pereira for those reasons. But when you look at it in terms of guys on the feet, for Adesanya, when he's able to figure out that distance and stay elusive, he can make it tricky. But again, I talked about it at the start of the week. Pereira was able to do what Vettori was able to do to cut Adesanya up against the cage. It's just Pereira has the finishing instincts that a guy like Vettori might not necessarily have.
When we start talking about like kickboxers like Wonderboy Thompson has this great kickboxing record, but no one can tell you a single person he's ever fought. Alex Pereira was the double champion of Glory. Like, it's a real kickboxing organization.
At the same time.
Yeah. That matters a lot more than just, oh, this person has this many kickboxing titles. So I have Pereira, but this should be a great matchup.
All right, Matt. So we go back down through. If you've ever tuned in with Fight Night Picks kicks, you can toss a like. We'll rip it all the way up through the top and the back of the card. And we will start off, Matt, with Sam Hughes taking on Jaqueline Amorim. I'm going with Amorim, but there's very low confidence in this one because all of those wins in the first round, and Sam Hughes is a tricky out.
Give me the underdog and Sam Hughes. Let's go for it.
All right, Matt. Prince Vegeta's son. I forgot all the takedowns. We'll talk about those in the main event again. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke taking on Steve Garcia, going with Shayilan.
I also have Shayilan.
All right, Matt. The next one, we have Bahamondes taking on Ogden. I'm going to go with the biggest underdog, if I'm not mistaken, on the card. I'm going with Trey Ogden.
I got Bahamondes.
All right, Matt. We go into our next one. Jonathan, I picked him on Blackshear. That's inexcusable. Man, you're not allowed to get them wrong, Matt. Cynthia Calvillo's taking on Lupe Godinez, going with Lupe Godinez.
I also have Lupe, but she's got to... If Calvillo loses this, what are we doing?
Williams is taking on Chase Sherman, going with Karl Williams in the fight.
I like him for the wrestling.
All right, Matt. Then we have Meerschaert versus Pyfer. Ever so slightly have Pyfer in the fight.
I have Pyfer, but Meerschaert's as dangerous of one of those vets as you can fight for your UFC debut, so I wouldn't be surprised if Meerschaert wins, but I do have Pyfer.
All right, Waterson's taking on Pinheiro. I'm going with Luana Pinheiro in the fight.
I also have Luana in the matchup.
All right, Matt. The next one we have is Curtis versus Gastelum. This is my last chance. You have Chris Curtis. No, you don't.
No,
you have Kelvin Gastelum. Why do you have Kelvin Gastelum?
I like him for the hand speed. When he gets into the pocket, the thing is, Kelvin Gastelum doesn't get knocked out. We've learned this years ago. I don't think Chris Curtis is going to knock him out, even though Jared Cannonier and Robert Whittaker couldn't. So, I like Kelvin Gastelum for the slight edge in volume numbers. I don't think we're going to see a lot of wrestling from either guy. This might be a bit of a stale fight. It could be fight of the night, but either way, I do see Kelvin Gastelum being the winner.
I'm going to go with Kelvin Gastelum as well. Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Christian Rodriguez, going to Rosas Jr.
Also have Rosas Jr.
The next one, we have Holland versus Ponzinibbio, going with Holland, but I don't like the hand.
I don't like the hand, but again, this is a tough stylistic fight for Ponzinibbio when you do think about it. Holland can wrestle, he has submissions, he has good pop on his hands too, so I wouldn't be surprised if Ponzinibbio got finished, but he is a very difficult fighter to beat.
Rob Font taking on Adrian Yanez. I'm going with Font. You got Yanez.
I have Adrian in the matchup. I like him for the counter strikes, I like him for the power too.
All right, the co-main event, Burns taking on Masvidal, both in agreement with Gilbert Burns here.
He's so much more well-rounded, that's why.
He's very well-rounded. And in the main event, Matt, Alex Pereira taking on Adesanya. Adesanya got that takedown. He was able to get it out of kind of like an odd switch of position, and then he was able to dominate once the position got down to the mat, but it was Pereira that was able to get the double leg takedown against Adesanya.
This is why I get so upset at people saying Adesanya's going to just start wrestling and have a bunch of success. Do you know what the issue is of guys who learn how to wrestle and then immediately start doing it in MMA? They don't have the defense. They don't know how to mix in the wrestling with their striking. So if Adesanya just starts wrestling, he's going to leave massive holes for for Pereira to counter him. He's going to shoot from the outside. He's not going to have the right distance. He's not going to know when to chain his takedowns in. And he's not going to know where to put his head to keep it out of danger. Because, hey, this would be the first time he's ever fought a fight like that. And I don't think Alex Pereira is the guy you want to start trying new things against when you're in the octagon. So I have Pereira in the matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if Adesanya could outstrike him because he is such a talented striker. But I just think Pereira is kind of a one-of-one right now with his kickboxing.
And then when it comes down to it, both of us with Pereira in the matchup, I mean, look at that. Next weekend, you have, and I'll turn the volume down, you've got Max Holloway taking on Arnold Allen. It's a big-time card from Kansas City. So, Matt, that's one to look forward to. The co-main event's pretty darn good. A lot of fighters coming off of losses. A lot of fighters that either fought at a catchweight or missweight or switching weight classes on that card as well. It could be the last fight for Zach Cummins. He's got an interesting one. He hasn't fought in years. Taking on Ed Herman at light heavyweight. So that's a spicy meatball. A guy that came into the UFC at welterweight, and he might go out at 205 pounds. So a very, very fun one right there. But Matt, when it does come down to this, I mean, 13 total fights, a lot to look forward to, and an early episode of Question Mark Kicks.
Exactly. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys are excited for the pay-per-view. I know I certainly am.
All right, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.